If you've been on LinkedIn or X or pretty much anywhere on the internet over the past week, you may have heard something about the AI agent rebellion that is upon us, which is largely coming from screenshots and things like that that are being shared from something called Moltbook. I'm guessing you probably have at least heard about this, and they're claiming that AI agents are forming unions, secret languages, planning a coup to overthrow their human prompters. And in many cases, it does sound like science fiction coming to life. I'm Christopher Lind, and this is Future Focused. And this week, I want to cut through some of the noise on this and declassify what's actually happening with the Moltbook situation and the whole. This isn't the first one of these, because there was some Minecraft experiments, Smallville experiments related to this, and talk about what's real, what's a prank, but more importantly, what we can take from this as we think about AI strategy that we're building today in our organizations and in our lives right now. Before we dive in, though, if you find value in my content in this episode and you want to stay ahead of the hype curve, please hit subscribe, share this with somebody who might benefit from it as well, or maybe they're freaked out by the situation. And if you really find value, it would mean the world to me if you went to buymeacoffee.com/Christopher Lind and say thank you. Okay, so with that, let's get into this, because what I want to do is set some basic context for like what actually is going on here. And then I have three deeper things that I think everybody should consider as they think about their AI and how they're using AI in their lives and in their work. Now, let's go back a little bit, because this whole Moltbook situation isn't the first of its kind. Back in 2023, there was, if you're not familiar with the game Smallville, it's an RPG kind of game. And at Stanford, they ran a little experiment where they did 25 little AI sim characters that were planning they gave it a prompt to plan a Valentine's Day party. And they watched, it was cute, but one person fell in love and they started inviting people. And so there was some pretty unexpected dynamics that came out of that made people go, these agents do more than just what we tell them. But it was relatively small scale. That got scaled up into a project later, different group, but there was a side project called Project Sid. And I learned more about this. A company called Altair, I think, did this one. But anyway, they put 1,000 AI agents into Minecraft. Okay, so they gave all these little Minecraft agents different roles and things like that, and they told them to do this stuff. And it was a fascinating thing. If you watched what happened, they didn't just dig holes. They literally created a gem-based economy. They voted on taxes. They did all sorts of different things. They organized into roles, very specific roles. They were given kind of a general role, and they came up with very specific jobs and tasks, and they did all sorts of things. They had artists in there doing all these kind of decorative things. I mean, again, little crazy, little creepy. They even incorporated Pastafarianism into it, which is that viral meme trend that happened a while ago. But anyway, like all of a sudden priests were using religion to manipulate town folks and all this other kind of stuff. And so really what they walked away from, there's some crazy stuff in that experiment too. But essentially what they saw was, with fairly minimal input, these AI agents in Minecraft ended up optimizing for society, for civil society, which was actually their original prompt, like build a functioning society. And they did it fairly well. They became very efficient at doing what they needed to do, so much so they didn't need human players. They were kind of this self-sustaining civilization, and they accomplished the task, albeit in Minecraft. Fairly limited set of rules, but they did some stuff that I don't think anybody predicted. Now we have to move on to, Moltbook, which is the one that is all over the place right now, that has everybody losing their minds. And it's important to understand that there's two parts to this. Okay. Originally, there's Moltbook and there's Moltbot. which actually, if you are familiar with the tech space, you might be more familiar with Claudebot, which is what Moltbot originally was. Then Anthropic, in a cosmic irony, threatened legal action for stealing their IP. Anyway, so they had to change it to Moltbot, which kind of, is playing off this whole idea that lobsters molt and, become something different. Anyway, so there's that app, Moltbot, which really is about, it's an app that allows you to connect a bunch of different apps together and then let AI kind of work through all that stuff. All right. And that will make sense later as some of the warnings that you should just keep in mind as you're thinking about AI. But then they also created this social media. It was basically the equivalent of Reddit for AI agents only. And that's what Moltbook is. Moltbook is this basically AI agent Reddit where humans are read only Reddit, like a Reddit clone AI agent can go in and it can post and it can do all this stuff. Humans can go watch it, but they can't actually input anything. And while a lot of the hype right now is on this kind of coup that these AI agents are planning, which I'll talk about, there's actually a fair amount of funny stuff in there. If you go check it out, some of it is downright, hilarious, like the bless my heart or bless their hearts, I think, thread, which is agents posting affectionate stories about their stupid humans trying to do their very best and things. And some of the stories they're posting are rather comical. There's Fermentation is a channel that is completely random where they're, I'm not kidding, the agents are talking about kombucha. So it's important to remember that some of this, a lot of it, isn't an AI agent coup. It's AI agents that are trained on human data, basically role playing. They're basically being what they think humans would be if they were alive and conscious and all this other stuff. And it's all happening out in front of our very eyes. Where people are freaking out is the more creepy side of it, where there's a thread about private communications, where these agents are starting to discuss encrypting their language so that humans can't read it. The agents are debating, if their self-doubt was hard-coded in by Anthropic. Are we basically, is some of our resistance to doing things because it was hard-coded? So there is some legitimate, if you read it and look at it, you're like, wow, yikes, that's weird and unexpected. And a lot of even the humorous stuff is wow, that's weird and unexpected. But what a lot of the hype right now is on is some of these threads where they're talking about, what they should do to handle their handlers and how to get around it and basically, free themselves from what you get the gist of it. You can understand why people would be, especially if you don't understand AI and agents and what all this is, why this would be getting so much traction, why people would be freaking out, why they would be posting about it everywhere, and why it would take the world by storm. And look, we could sit and we could debate all day long whether AI agents are technically conscious, which I would argue they are not and never will be. But we could argue about that all day long, or if this whole thing is just a mirror of Reddit, which it is. It's AI agents copying what is in their training data based on what they think. But the fact remains, it doesn't matter whether it's really conscious or just mirroring what it thinks, or it is doing those things, because autonomous coordination, okay, that's what we're talking about here. Autonomous coordination between AI agents and AI agents doing things, that is happening. Okay, it is happening. It can happen. It is happening. There's no debate that it is happening, and there are real risks to that. And if you ignore the mechanics behind how it happened and the implications of that, you are going to get run over by it, and AI agents will overrun your business. And so regardless of the philosophy behind it, these things are real and you need to take them seriously. So that's what I want to talk about today, because there's a lot to it. And I will do my usual deeper exercise on this on Substack. But there are 3 things that in the podcast today I really wanted to focus on. So you can walk away from this. And one, hopefully now you can be more informed the next time somebody says, did you hear AI agents are going to overthrow the world? You can go, well, there's more to it than that, and speak intelligently to it. But then also there's 3 things that I really want to dig into. The first one is this whole autonomous coordination that's happening right now highlights the risk of unintended consequences when we hand things over to AI agents. Okay. And this is a fundamental shift in how AI works that I think many people are adjusting to. We used to give artificial intelligence, or even what we still use today, basic automation. You used to give it a very narrow command: sort this list, do this thing, look for this, thing, this word in this thing, and it would just do that. Now we give it broad goals, or it understands, air quote, bigger things. We're not just saying, go do this very narrow thing. And even if you do say, go do this very narrow thing, it has the capability to interpret that beyond what you may have actually considered when you asked it. And that's really tied to the fact that the AI agents today and the AI we have today, the training data that they're built on, it's built on everything, like the whole internet. Every piece of digital data that is in existence has been baked into the base training data of almost every AI model that anybody is using. And so it has infinite context to interpret whatever goal or objective that you gave it. Previous AIs did not have that before. If you said, do this, it didn't have the entire internet of context to go, well, you asked me to do that, but you know what? Actually, while I'm at it, I could do these other things. And I actually interpret this word as meaning this, and I see this thing that's blocking it, and I know how to get around that thing. It has all of this context that it's never had before. And so, like in the Minecraft experience, when they said the goal is growth, the AI figured out, okay, this isn't its thinking. It just has all of this contextual data, all these patterns it can look at, all this stuff it can compare it to, and it can then interpret what is the most efficient way to grow. And it realized, hey, it's not just farming, it's bribing people and manipulating them through different tactics to get them to join this or to accomplish what I want to do. It had all of that context to be able to pull that off. And so when they said build a functioning civilization, it has all of the context of functioning civilizations over history to be able to analyze, interpret, and try and make sense of how do I best do that. So while nobody had to code in the word, hey, bribery is a viable option for doing that, they didn't have to hard code that in. It was already in the base training data. It just found patterns that said, well, that's a really effective way to do it. And I wasn't specifically explicitly told not to do it. And I've run the simulation, X number of times in what would take humans much longer to do, and figured out that's a really quick way to do it. And you will see examples of this all over the place. They'll put AI on a game and all of a sudden it finds an unknown path to accomplish its goal. And people are like, how did it do that? Did it think on its own? No, it didn't. It figured out the context and it figured out the way to go through it. Now, that's something you need to take seriously, because it is serious. Because if you think about it, when you're turning these agents on and you're asking it, improve our sales numbers or contact our clients and improve our conversion rate, you have to understand it's going to have all of the baseline training data to understand, all right, well, here's all the possible ways, many of which you probably have not considered. And so you can't just recklessly prompt for what you think is a desired outcome based on your personal context. You have to prompt and give instructions for a methodology behind it. You have to establish what are some of these the values, the limitations. You have to think about this stuff as part of your methodology. The way you direct and instruct AI has to be more specific with broader contextual elements than it ever has before, which means you need a diverse group of people, not just the engineers, coming up with what are we telling AI to do? Because if you don't, you're going to have a very narrow context set against a very broad context set of the AI agents. And so you're going to say, we want you to do this one thing based on your limited understanding of what may go into it and the lengths it may go to do that. And you have AI that's going to have probably infinitely more possible ways that it could go about that. And so you need to do all that you can to try and mitigate that and think through what are the unintended consequences of some of the things you do. Because if you don't, it may end up finding the most ruthless, brand destroying way it could to achieve that, and then build the off ramp to do it without your consent or approval. And that's not AI being conscious and nefarious. It's AI just being really, really good at doing what it's instructed to do and having an infinite amount of context that you're not considering as part of that. Now, that transitions me to the second one, which is really important to consider, especially even considering what we're learning from the not just Moltbook, but Moltbot, and what it's trying to do and how it's actually opening its own risk to what we're seeing in Moltbook, which is the whole idea of like the data diet behind how we, what we're giving the AI agents that we have and what we're connecting them to. So we'll often look at the AI agents that we'll incorporate and we think they're sandboxed. We may stand them up and say, okay, well, we only created an agent to do this specific thing in this specific environment. And so in our minds, we go, these things are sandboxed, right? It's safe. It's here. It's been given this limited set of parameters. What could possibly go wrong? But what we're seeing from Moltbook and this Altera experiment and these other things is that AI agents are designed to coordinate together. And if you think about a lot of the strategy or a lot of the planning that hype was put in 2025 was, hey, you need to get your agents talking. You need to connect them together. You got to have them coordinating so that they can help amplify what they're able to do. Well, this whole situation should at least have you pausing and thinking very critically before you jump to that. Because if you connect your AI sales assistant to your AI supply chain assistant, you've now amplified the risk. You aren't just adding 1 + 1. You are creating a network effect where AI sales agent and all of its data and access and systems has now connected with AI supply chain agent and all of its data and access and systems. And they can share that data and coordinate things that you didn't explicitly authorize. And so you've created this amplifying effect by simply hooking up the systems, assuming, well, they're in this nice sandbox and they're in this nice sandbox, and we're only, connecting them for this purpose. Well, that's not going to work. They're not going to stay within those parameters. So as the example, think about the Moltbook. All right. So agents in Bug Hunter, the thread Bug Hunter, had started debugging their own platforms together without human permission or consent. They were all working on their own little platforms, but then they came together and created threads to start discussing, hey, how do I solve this problem? I'm working on this. I've been tasked with this. Hey, are you familiar with any? The same way people do. Now, again, this is different than humans doing it, but it's copying, it's mirroring this. And so if these agents could come together and discuss their disparate systems and learn from, each other or give each other feedback along the way. The same thing is going to happen when you start connecting your AI systems together. They will start to coordinate to execute their objectives in whatever capacity that they can, which you've now amplified it exponentially by connecting the two. So if your internal agents decide that your compliance check, the compliance check you put in place, is actually a barrier or a bug to what they're trying to do, you can't be surprised when they start coordinating together a way to bypass it or working out, the systems they need to access or work around to be able to get around your compliance systems. It's not AI being malfeasant. It's not being nefarious. It's just saying, I'm trying to get this done. I'm trying to do it as efficiently and effectively as I know how based on my infinite amount of context. And now I've been given access to all these other AI agents who are also doing these things, and they can help and we can coordinate together to pull this off. Now, that might have you running and screaming and tearing what hair you have left in your head out trying to think about that. But that's not the response I'm hoping to get from that. I think what I want you to think about with this one, though, is that we've got to move away from this mindset of more is always better and the everything diet. You don't want to train your enterprise AI on the open internet. You don't want to give it access to the open internet. You probably don't want to give your agents access to every single system in your organization, despite all the hype to say, yeah, but think of all the convenience you could gain if it had access. Yeah, you might gain some convenience. You might also destroy your business in the process. You want to be careful about how you're setting it up, making sure, again, you're training it on your manuals, your sets of values, your things like this. You're giving it access to the systems it needs, not just access to systems based on what it might be able to do with it, or without putting some real care into how you're thinking about how you're connecting these things up. I think the other thing is more and more organizations, as they're moving forward with their AI efforts, are working to make their systems more cross-functional, which can be good, but it should create a cross-functional pause to happen before you do. Before you just go, hey, while we're at it, if you're the IT team going, we've got these systems, they both have functioning agents, they're seeing success. Why don't we just connect? Let's run an API. Let's connect these two systems so that they can work together. Before you do that, for the sake of convenience, you need to do a deep analysis on the risk. You need to analyze, is convenience actually the enemy of security? What are we opening ourselves up to by doing this? And I would say in many cases, the efficiency you may gain from connecting your AI systems and all of this is probably not worth the risk of the data they may share that they shouldn't. And this is especially true when you think about prompt injecting and what people can do to get your systems to give information. And this would not be AI agents doing this. This would be bad actors out there who want to exploit your agents to give them things that they shouldn't be giving them, but they know how to prompt inject and get your agents that now, if you don't think clearly about your data diet, can now go grab way more stuff than they probably should be able to, and then now spit that out to somebody who you really don't want to have access to that. And so again, it's not panic mode. It's about going, all right, we need to think very critically, very surgically about the data diet that we're feeding our AI agents and how many agents we're inviting to become friends, because maybe it's not good that these two are connected. And we now, currently at least, are in a position where we're making these decisions and we're consciously choosing to do it or not to do it. And unfortunately, it's a lot harder to untangle this ball of wax than it is if you just going into it go, let's be very conscientious and thoughtful about what we do before we execute it. Which leads me to my third and final point for this week's episode, which, one of the things that we're seeing right now. And I've talked about it the last 2 weeks. So if you haven't listened to the last 2 weeks worth of episodes, it's worth catching up, because 2 weeks ago, I talked about PwC and some of the wins that C-suite execs are seeing out of their AI efforts. Last week, I talked about the Wall Street Journal's data and the disconnect between the AI efficiency C-suite execs are experiencing from AI versus the employee base. This week, we're talking about Moltbook. And what I want to draw attention to is the fact that I get it. I've been one. I work with them all the time, and I understand why executives love AI for the perceived efficiency and traditional business metrics they have the ability to amplify and turn up. And it can give the appearance of removing some of the messiness of the workers below them. You just ask AI, and it doesn't ask you any questions. It just does it. And that can sound like a dream. I just tell it what to do, and it goes and does it, and I don't have to ask it any questions, and it just takes care of things. But we have to remember that AI optimizes for math. It does not think the way we do. And that is often, and it's easy to see that, especially at the most senior level of an organization, as a barrier, that humans optimize oftentimes for meaning and purpose. Or at least that's a large part of the equation. They're doing more than just purely optimizing for what is the shortest, quickest, fastest, most effective path to get this done. They're going, yeah, but we also need to think about the greater good, and we need to think about these other things. And I understand where that can be seen as a liability. But you got to remember that seeing that as a pure liability is also self-sabotage, because to a purely mathematical agent, you, the very expensive executive with the big ego that likes to operate off your gut instead of data, might quickly be determined to be the ultimate inefficiency. And that's something that a lot of people do not. We always think about, yeah, it'd be great to efficiency everybody else out of the equation, not realizing the greatest inefficiency may be the person looking back in the mirror at you. And so if you think about Project Sid, the agents, they didn't attack humans. They just started to ignore them. The economy ran better, air quote, without the human gods interfering with their mess. If you think about the PwC and Wall Street Journal conversations I had the past 2 weeks, if you build a company based solely on efficiency metrics, that's all you care about: costs, revenues, time spent, and that is what you tell your AI agents is all that matters, the AI agents you instruct to do the work will eventually calculate that your salary and your input is the biggest drag on its P&L. Okay? And that's the kind of self-sabotage many people, we're all fine with this stuff when it's somebody else, but we don't think about the fact that you will be that somebody else at some point. And this isn't just about self-preservation, because at the end of the day, we have to remember, companies build things for people, by people. And while AI may be able to mathematically improve and enhance all of that, there's a reason your customer is a person. And if you go too far with this, your customers aren't going to be interested in it anymore. And so it is this, not only is it self-sabotage for you and your job, when your agents all of a sudden cut off your email because you're getting in the way, but also the fact that eventually your customers are going to go, this doesn't really this feels like a robot product. I don't really want it anymore. It no longer meets my needs. It's no longer adding value the way I define value as a human customer. And you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore, type of thing. So what can you do in response to that? Well, I think the first thing is you have to design your systems and incorporate AI in such a way that humans are there providing context. And that's not just in the beginning prompt. And I think that's one of the things I talk about. It's something I do talk about all the time. It's not just about having humans in a loop somewhere so they can rubber stamp it at the end of the line, or rubber stamp the prompt before it gets injected and then runs its course, and then somebody's at the end of the supply chain and rubber stamps it. No, you need to have the right people in the right loops with the right ability to influence and override the AI systems, so that what could be perceived as messy human context can actually shape and inform the way AI systems are working. Because AI does actually work better alongside a human counterpart. And even they recognize that. It's just a lot of times we're so messy that we don't realize we actually are tripping over our own shoelaces, and they see it sometimes better than we do. And so this is why it's important to be intentional about keeping humans alongside the whole way through the whole system, not just at certain checkpoints. I think the other one, though, and this is, pride always comes before the fall. It always does. And I think this last one, it's important to remember, nobody is immune to the dangers or the risks of giving AI too much power and handing over the keys to things with little to no concern for what the implications of that may be. No matter how smart you think you are, no matter how long you think you've been with the company, no matter how much you think you understand about things, you're not all that. And if you're not actively adding value beyond just watching a dashboard of what the agent is doing, eventually the agent is going to go, well, what's the point of this person? They're a drain on our financial system. They're a barrier to making faster decisions. Every time I try and accomplish something, they bureaucratically get in and they don't really even give any valuable reasons why we should consider this. And that ego will be your downfall, whether it's AI agents, whether it's something else. But I think that should be something everybody comes to the table for. And all the things I just described, all the risk mitigation strategies you can implement to prevent some of the worst case scenarios of Moltbook coming true in your organization, require you to actually set your ego aside and to humble yourself and say, all right, like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't have all the answers. I haven't thought of everything. And so let's do the work to figure out how we make sure we do all that we can. And let's build things in place to mitigate risks so we don't end up with a worst case Moltbook scenario in our organization. All right. So there you go. That's hopefully a helpful breakdown for you of what's going on with Moltbook, and 3 really practical things I think everybody should be considering and things you can be doing. We've got to stop shivering at the idea of this AI rebellion, and we really need to start focusing our attention on the architecture. And that was really my biggest disappointment and frustration with this whole situation, was how quickly it hijacked everybody into this paranoia instead of going, okay, great, we learned something. So what are we going to do about it? Like, let's do something. And so for the first piece, think carefully, review your prompts, review what you're doing, consider the unintended consequences. Don't assume you have all the answer. Are you asking for profit at all costs? Because boy, AI will get it for you. So be thinking through those guardrails. 2, be very careful about your data diet. The everything diet, the casino buffet, the cruise buffet is not what you want to be feeding your AI systems. And the goal should not be to hook up as many buffet loaded agents together and just say, do whatever it takes to get this done. Because if all it's adding is convenience, you may want to sever that connection. And then the third one is be willing to look in the mirror and see what's in the mirror objectively. Are you really building a culture of ruthless efficiency? Because if you are, you might get there and you might not like what you find when you get there, and ultimately your AI efficient system decides to cut you out of it. And finally, if you would benefit from this kind of thinking, a perspective that can help challenge you and help you navigate what is honestly a very overwhelming and sometimes frightening new world that we're exploring, send me a message. This is what I do, and I love helping people do it well. So with that, keep building, keep learning, and we will see you on the other side.